And hello and welcome. My name is Martin, and today what I'm going to be talking about is how to do a export versus why you would do a migrate. So if you're going to be taking an asset from Unreal and sending it to one of your classmates or to another person who's working on a similar project, there may be different things that you're going to have to send. So if you're going to send, let's say, a material or a texture, you're going to do that differently than if you were going to export, let's say, a character or an actor or a blueprint or anything that would have multiple components. So if we look at this, if we look at our character here, we can see that we have two skeletal meshes, we have quite a few guns, we have all the different textures and colors that make up this person. We have cameras, there's code attached. So there's a lot of stuff going on with this character. So if you went and just found the asset for the character and moved it over, you'd be missing like 90% of it. So what we do with objects that are much more complicated like this is we allow the computer to kind of grab all the little pieces, put them into a little package, and then we make that package available to the other system. Now, in the delivery of that, we have two options. We have what's called a migrate, and we have what's called an export. Now, the migrate would be if you have access to the project that you're working on, so or the project that you're going to be sending it to. So you're inside the project, you're on a computer, the other project that you're going to send it to is on the same computer or on the same network or on an external hard drive that's connected to the computer, and you can just pick what content folder it's going to go to. And essentially that's the big difference, is that migrate happens when it happens inside the same computer or computer to project on the same system, whereas the export is going to be where you need to take the asset away from the computer system and introduce it into another system. So let's say I'm working on a project with somebody in a different state and I need to email them, or I need to upload the asset to an FTP site and then let them download it later onto their project. So I don't have access directly to their project. They would have to then import that asset into the Unreal Engine as whatever it is, most likely an FBX. So let's go ahead and see what we have to do. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go to the character, select them, right click and go to browse to asset, and what that does is it takes me directly to where this asset is inside my content browser. With that, we can now right click on this and we can see that we have asset actions and we have both export and migrate. Now for us, we are going to need to do the export because obviously we don't have access to each other's computers. If we had been in class, we would have been able to have connected an external hard drive to whatever it is that you're working on and shared the assets that way. So you could have used the migrate. You could have used both, but you could have used the migrate option in that case. So we're actually going to do that option first, just to show you what it looks like, and then we'll go through and do the export option later. So I'm going to go ahead and hit migrate, and what it's going to do is it's going to build all the assets that are part of this character, and you can actually see that there's quite a few things that go along with this character. So we see all the different assets that'll be part of this. We can see the different meshes that we've used. We have the first person BP because remember we have the toggling back and forth with this character from first person to third person. So there's a lot of stuff that goes along with this character. So once we've allowed the computer to find all those things, we're going to click OK. And then it's going to ask us where we want to put it. But notice up here it says very distinctly, choose a destination content folder. So let's go and look and see where I might have a project on this computer. Let's go to Documents. Let's go to Game. I think the project that I'm in right now is let's put it in there. So there's a content folder, right? So this is the folder that I have all my projects in. You can see the logo one that I've shown you guys. This is the one that I've been working for in class. This is another project that I think I started just to do an example video or something. So I select the project that I want to go into. I say select that. Oops, sorry, did that incorrectly. Choose a destination folder. So there's my project. I'm going to hit content, and then I'm going to say select that folder. And what it's going to do is then it's going to start moving all those files from this project to the other project into the content folder and distribute them the way they need to, so then that way this character will then work. So I believe we just got the message down there at the bottom that this has been done completely or correctly. So now let's go and see if we can go and open up that project and import that, or whether it's actually in there. Okay, so the folder that I sent it to was this one called My Project. So let's open up My Project and let's see if our character is now in there. Okay, so now that the project is open, I'm going to check my content folder and I'm going to scroll down. Sure enough, there is the Paragon character. If I open them up, I see character. Let me see. Starter content, side scroller BP, first person BP, blueprints. There she is. Okay, because she was in first person blueprints. So I can now grab that. Let's say put her out on the floor. Hopefully, she may or may not. Okay, there she is. And it looks like everything's there. All the meshes, everything seems to be there. I'm not going to take the time to make her the first person player in this game, just to see that we were actually able to get the assets to transfer from one location to another location. So that would be the migrate. Okay, now that we have gotten in the migrated character, let's look and see how this would work for the export. So let's go back to the other project. Okay, and now that we're in the other project, we would assume that what we would do is right click, go to the character, right click on the character and hit asset actions and export. And what that'll do is it's going to give you a file that looks like this. It's going to say first person something something dot copy. You try to import this into the other document and it's going to say nope, didn't like that. And that's because it didn't grab everything. It just grabbed this and I made a copy of whatever that first person character was, because that happens to be what we have this character as. What we are going to need to do is create an FBX, and that FBX is going to grab all the assets that are attached to the character, but it's not going to grab any of the code or put any of the things in the places where they were supposed to be. So essentially what you'll have to do is you will get the character, but you will have to then rebuild the character as of sorts. I can show you how to do this to a certain extent, and then you would have to figure out a way to be able to, copy your code, or do a screen capture of your code. If you're on a PC, you have a button up there that says print screen PR, and on mine it says PRTSC. Yours might be all spelled out, just depends. But print screen, so you could do a print screen of your code, and then somebody else could then rebuild that code as needed. Obviously, this is not ideal. It's not the best way to do this, unfortunately, because of the way that we're sending stuff and the fact that we don't have access to each other's computers to be able to migrate files. This is what we're going to have to do. So with the character selected, what we want to do is not right click, but we're going to come up here to file and we're going to say export selected. With export selected, we then get to name this, so we're going to go ahead and call this Durka, let's say export 1. And I'm going to select a folder for that to go to. I've created a folder on my desktop called Durka Export, and I'm going to go ahead and save it there. So it's on my desktop and not in a project. Now the other thing that I have done is I've made sure that all these options are checked, and I have saved it in the newest format of FBX. If you're working on an older version of the software, you may need an older version of the FBX to get this to work. Otherwise, we go ahead, make sure that you do import the skeletal mesh, and just make sure all of these are checked. So we're going to go ahead and hit export. It's going to go ahead and export our file. I've already seen the finished come up, and let's go to the other project. So we're going to now go to this project. which is the project that we're exporting it into. So let's imagine that I have sent this in an email to somebody, they have now received it, and they're ready to import this into their project. So what I would do first is I would right click, create a folder. Let's go ahead and call this Durka import. And now that we have that there, we can import. So I'm going to go ahead and click import. And there's Durka export 1. We're going to go ahead and hit open. And as this comes in, it's going to ask me a couple of questions. I do want to make sure that I have the skeletal mesh imported, that I import the mesh itself. Here, what I can do is go ahead and grab the Durka skeletal mesh and place it in there. And everything else will be left alone. So you want to make sure up here in this part that says mesh that we're importing, that we're selecting all those options. So from there, we're going to hit import. Okay, we're going to say no to all. And basically you'll see now that we have all the assets, all the colors, all the options that would have made this character. I'm going to go ahead and wait for the compilers. And I can maybe do a save all at the same time and just get the asterisks off of there. So now that the compilers are finished, what I would have to do is rebuild the character, because all these are essentially the assets that we pulled in over from the other thing. They don't have any of the code that are built into them. This is just strictly the asset. So we would have to right click and go into blueprint class, go into, let's say, character, call this Durka underscore import, just so we know which one it is. Let's do a save all. That way it gets rid of the asterisks. We'll double click, open up its blueprint. Now that we have it there, we can go to the mesh. We can say, here's the mesh. Let's go and grab the Valentine one. Do we have the one where? Yeah, that's the mesh that we created with the no weapon. Okay, we would have to adjust, her feet, basically. Then we would have to add the animation back in. So let's put Durka blueprint animation so she's not holding her gun anymore. So then we would have to add the gun component. So we would have to go in and add, let's say, another skeletal mesh. This one would be the gun. Anyway, so you would have to obviously make adjustments. The pivot point is off axis a little bit, so we would have to adjust the pivot point and bring it back into center, realign everything, put that secondary mesh for the other arms, put the mesh on those other arms, add the gun to those other arms. So you can see already that this starts to become a very big job, and it's not the same thing as being able to migrate something directly in. So if I was to put that character in, we now see that she's there. Again, if you were to double click on the character and let's say open up the blueprints and we look at her blueprints, we'll see that she does not have anything in her event graph, whereas the one that we migrated in, if we were to click on them and go into their event graph, we would see that all the code came in. Now, there are obviously places where we would need to make a couple of changes to some code. There might be pieces of, anytime you move something from one project to another project, you're always asking for little issues like this. So you'd have to go through, figure out what your issues are, and try to resolve them with this. Now, remember that this is also this happens to be a first to third person character that I created that I'm putting into a third person level with code that would have been different from what it would have been in the level. So that might be why I'm getting error messages like this. So, when you do your exports, make sure that you actually have the character in the situation with the code that you want for the same kind of gameplay. If not, you would have to make obviously adjustments to your code to fit the level that you're working in and to make sure that you're not having any issues with your character. So either way, it's going to be painful. I feel like it's less painful if you were to migrate. Now, the obvious situation here is, well, Martin, if that's the case, I should just rebuild the character myself. There's no point in, doing the export. So what I would say to that is what you could do is you could, let's say, migrate your character from the project that you're working in, right? Your group project to a let's say to a new project that has nothing else in it. All you're going to do is export the main character to that new project, and inside that new project, save it and then send that to your classmate, because what'll happen there is it'll be just the level, the very basic level that has nothing in there, right? So you haven't added a bunch of trees, you don't have all the different character kits. Like my project, when I look at it, I've probably imported something in the neighborhood of about 15 gigs worth of packs into my project. Now, if I was to export that project and give it to somebody else, it would be a 15 gig project. But if I take my first person character with the code, migrate it into a new project, and then send that project with nothing else in it, no other packs. I haven't downloaded anything else. I don't have a water pack in there. I don't have the fire particle system packs. It's just going to be that character in the basic level. If I send that should be a small enough file that you should be able to get away with transferring it. And remember that we have the ability to be able to use wetransfer.com, which will send up to a 2 gig file, and then you can check and see what the limits are on the software, or the information that you're sent. What you're transferring files with, right? So whatever platform it may be that you're transferring your files with. Okay. So that explains export versus migrate. And the other thing that I'm going to show you very quickly is we're going to go back to that other project. And let's say that I have a material that's in here that I want to export. So let me go back to content. Let me go to the starter pack. I'm just going to go to materials, because these are very different. These are one-shot things. It's not as complex as this main character is up here. It's just the clay brick. Maybe I created a glowing material that I want to send to somebody else. So what I would do is I would select the material, right click on it, go to show in Explorer. That is then going to open that up. And there it is. Sorry, I have a double screen. Okay, so it's going to open it up where that content is, right? So it's showing me, okay, so this is documents, there it is, blah, 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 all the way down to materials. So now all I have to do is right click on it, hit copy. This could go to an email. This could go to, it could go anywhere really. So what I'm going to do now is open up where that file was, and I'm going to navigate back to the project that I'm in. So this is the project that I got the file from. This is the project that I want that material to go to. I'm going to click on my project. I'm going to go to content, and I'm just going to leave it here in the content in that window, so we should be able to see it. We don't have to hunt for it too long. So I'm going to hit paste, and now that asset's there. So if I go back to the game that we were working in, the one that we're transferring things to, I can go to content, and sure enough, there's that material file. So for materials and textures, you're going to do it this way. If it's anything complex like a pawn, an actor, or a character that are obviously much more complex, the migrate would be the best way to do it, even though there are going to be some glitches because you're putting them into a new level. There's certain, there may be events, like you may have created a custom event in one, and then that custom event has to be recreated. If you're using variables, the variables are going to have to be redone because they're not going to transfer correctly. So there will be some cleaning up that you will have to do, but I think transferring the first person character, especially with all the different meshes, the materials that we're using, and the code that we've built, this is going to be the thing that's going to get you the closest to getting there. Obviously the export is not ideal. You would have to essentially rebuild the character if you were going to do it that way. And my suggestion is, like I said, you're working in your project, you finally got your character working, you're ready to send that character or that actor to a classmate so that they can import it into their project. I would create a new project, save it, leave it blank, don't do anything super crazy in it, just leave it as a first person shooter or whatever version of the level that. So if you created a first person shooter, make it a first person level, keep it simple. simple. Don't add any materials, don't add any meshes to it. Transfer or migrate the character from the project that you're in to that new blank project essentially, and then save that blank project once the first person character has come in. Once that's there, you can then send that project to your classmates through an email service like WeTransfer.com, and then have them downloaded. Once they're downloaded, they would just open up the project and they could technically start working from there, or they could migrate the character from that project into their own project. And then at that point, since both projects are on the same computer, you would be able to do the migrate, right? So whatever method works for you, that's fine. We now know how we are going to be able to transfer assets from one project to another project, and we've seen it with one of the most complex assets, which is the first person character that has a bunch of code. So hopefully you found the video informative, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.